Chapter 572 Uneasiness. Sister, you have to think of a way to help me get back at her. How do you want to do that? Thing, I'm not having a good time, so she can forget about being comfortable. Zhou Jiaqing became listless when she said this. She told her sister how she tried to send a spy into the Gu residence but was rejected by Zhou Ying at a glance. Zhou Jiaqing smiled and said, "You know how to use your brain but are still immature. So what if a servant girl successfully entered the Gu residence and climbed into Gu Shengru's bed? She was just a servant girl. At most, she would cause some trouble for her. If Zhou Ying wanted to get rid of her, it would be easy. Then what should we do? If I remember correctly, they have been married for more than 3 years, but there has been no news of Zhou Ying's pregnancy." "Right, I only noticed after you brought it up." Zhou Jiaqing's eyes lit up. "It's true. You got married a year later than her and already have a child, but there's no news of her pregnancy. Don't worry about this. It'll help you vent your anger later." "How?" "Secrets cannot be revealed," Zhou Jiaqing said with a stern face. She knew Zhou Jiaqing was simply unable to hide a secret. If she leaked it, wouldn't her plans fail before she could implement them? Zhou Jiaqing still wanted to say something, but Mother Zhou walked over and said, "Your sister has just given birth and is tired. You'd better not bother her too much." She looked at Zhou Jiaqing and added, "Your dad asked me to bring 2 herbal recipes over, and I gave them to Mrs. Yu. Take good care of yourself. We will come to see you in 2 days." After saying that, Mother Zhou pulled Zhou Jiaqing up. "Hurry up, let's go. Let your sister have a good rest." After saying that, she greeted Mrs. Yu goodbye as Mrs. Yu sent them out. When Mrs. Yu returned, she saw Zhou Jiaqing still had her eyes wide open, so she asked, "Madam, do you want to eat something?" "There's no need. Hasn't His Highness been here yet?" "No, after His Highness left the morning court, he hasn't returned. I think something happened." "I see." Zhou Jiaqing responded and closed her eyes. However, she felt a little uneasy. Ever since she deliberately fainted on the street, the number of times she saw His Highness could be counted on one hand. She didn't know if he was deliberately hiding from her or if he was really busy. Also, the princess consort would be married into the family after the new year, so Zhou Jiaqing did not have much time left. Thus, she had to regain her husband's favor quickly. Otherwise, she and her daughter would not have an easy time in the future. Zhou Ying stayed at the manor for more than 10 days. Just as the first prince and Yang Wanyu were about to get married, the 3 finally returned to the capital with a cart of vegetables. There were bunches of rapeseed, spinach, and cabbage. After entering the capital, Gu Qingrui brought a basket of each into the palace. Zhou Ying distributed the rest to Zhou Huaiming, King Rui, King An, and the Minister of Works. Later, she returned to her residence with Gu Wanning. On the other end, when the emperor found out that Gu Qingrui had come with vegetables, he immediately summoned him to his chambers. When he saw the green and juicy vegetables, he asked in surprise, "Are these really grown in the greenhouse?" "Of course. I just harvested them before returning to the capital, so they're still fresh. This is my reason for my visit," Gu Qingrui said. Good, good, good. The greenhouse vegetables are successful. In the future, our winter days will be much better." The emperor nodded repeatedly. He thought of something and asked, "Can you only grow these leafy vegetables?" "No. But leafy vegetables have a short growing period, so they can be eaten in about a month." Chapter 573 Dowry. That's true. Would the other vegetables be ready by the new year? Tough to say. If there's a possibility of early maturity, we can harvest them. However, they'll definitely be ready on the 15th of the first lunar month. The 15th is fine, it's an important festival. If you manage it well, it'll be a great achievement. This is my honor. If you have no other instructions, I will take my leave. Gu Qingrui said. Go. If there's anything, report it in time. The emperor nodded. After Gu Qingrui left, the emperor ordered eunuchly to bring all the vegetables to the imperial kitchen. At dinner, he wanted to taste the quality of the vegetables and see if they differed from those grown near the hot springs. On the other end, Zhou had just returned home when the little beggar Guzi, renamed Shi Tong, ran out to welcome her, saying, "Madam, you're back. This servant will help you carry your luggage." "All right, send the clothes to the main courtyard for Shizhu." Zhou smiled as she handed him the cloth bag she used to wrap her clothes. She later handed the remaining vegetables to Zhou Dashing and the others. As she walked in, Zhou Dashing whispered, "Qi Tong is quite smart and lively. If he's properly nurtured, he'll definitely be someone successful in the future." Zhou smiled and nodded. If it weren't for his intelligence, she wouldn't have chosen him to spread the news in the first place. Thinking of this, Zhou solemnly instructed Zhou Dashing, "All the more you should teach him. Let him learn as much as possible. Also, you should teach the young ones how to read too. They might be useful in the future." Understood. Zhou Dashing nodded in agreement. After dinner, Zhou asked, "Rui, what wedding gift do you think you're giving the first prince? He's marrying a consort, so we can't give him a gift according to King Rui's standards. I think it's better to give him a purple sand tea set. It's not expensive but it's practical. Let's go with that." Zhou nodded in agreement. If it weren't for making peace on the surface, she wouldn't even bother to go to the first prince's wedding, let alone give a congratulatory gift. After entering the inner space at night, Gu Qingrui returned to the villa to read some medical books after working on the grassland. Meanwhile, Zhou continued to deal with matters within the various mother god temples. They soon realized that the previous batch of fish, including the small fish in the river, had almost been fished out. It was clear how much meat the people lacked. As the fish in her interspace bred to their previous population, she left the eggs behind and distributed the remainder to severely malnourished areas via the mother god temple. She also released many wild ducks and even some wild duck eggs. After she was done, she checked on Yang Wanya's dowry. Although it was enough for 66 sets, the items inside were of terrible quality. The total cost was definitely not more than 30,000 taels of silver. To be honest, this dowry was not bad for most women. But as a concubine's dowry, it was not presentable. When she saw this, she suddenly understood why Yang Wanyu had been staring at Mrs. Gus' dowry. Zhou then looked at the first prince's residence, but no joy was present. There was only a small courtyard with new furniture with the word "Congratulations" pasted on it. Zhou did not know the rules of marrying a secondary consort here, so she did not think too much about it. Before she left, she heard Consort Hui and the servants talking about Zhou Jiaying giving birth to a daughter. She immediately looked at the fourth prince's mansion. At this moment, the fourth prince was planning something with seventh Su, and Zhou overheard it. She learned that they were searching for evidence of Yang Shiqing's corruption. But so far, they had only learned a little information from Xiao Heng's actions and had not found any useful evidence. After a moment, Seventh Su suggested, "Your Highness, what do you say we take advantage of Yang Wanya's marriage and send people to sneak into the Yang residence to investigate?" Chapter 574 Unforgivable. This is indeed an opportunity. Just send one person in. Remember, you must be smart, and it doesn't matter if you succeed or not as long as you don't expose us. King Kong said solemnly. Roger that. Oh, right. Do I need to make a move at King Rui's consort? There's no hurry. We have to wait until Gu Wanning enters the residence. That way, it'll be better for us to act once they fight. Seventh Su smiled wickedly and didn't say anything else. Zhou also realized that the blood aura on Seventh Su's body was much thicker than before. This kid had done many bad things recently. It was unforgivable that he wanted to stir up trouble at King Rui's residence by using Gu Wanning. Therefore, Zhou stuck a lightning talisman on his body after he went out. Instantly, his hair was burned and emitted a pungent smell as his clothes caught fire. He twitched twice, rolled his eyes, and fell to the ground. Fortunately, he was rescued in time. When King Kong heard the lightning strike, he immediately ran out in fear. It was the middle of winter, so how could there be thunder? When he saw Seventh Su's miserable state, he could not help but shudder. He recalled the thunderbolt on the execution ground. Could it be another warning from Mother God? However, his father and eldest brother had done worse. Why would they be fine when Seventh Su? King Kang's eyes narrowed at the thought of this, and he suddenly recalled how he had framed his eldest brother's subordinates to slip his spies in. Could it be? After confirming that Seventh Su's life was not in danger, he heaved a sigh of relief and glanced at everyone else. No one is allowed to tell anyone about what happened today. Otherwise, it'll kill you without mercy. At this point, he looked at the butler and said, "Uncle Hong, keep an eye on this matter." "Yes, Your Highness." Butler Hong responded and immediately dismissed the others. King Kong had his trusted aide carry Seventh Su into the guest room before calling for the residence physician to treat him. Mrs. Yu rushed over as the doctor entered and said, "Your Highness, the young miss is sick." "Quickly get the doctor." "Go away," King Kong replied unhappily. Mrs. Yu was stunned when she heard this. This was His Highness' first child. How could he? King Kong finally realized that it was his daughter who was ill. He then added in a gentler tone, "Wait, the doctor is busy inside." "Ah, yes." Mrs. Yu nodded and retreated aside. At the same time, she heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as His Highness didn't hate the young miss. About an hour later, the doctor came out and said, "Your Highness, the young master is now fine. He will just be in some pain, and he will recover in half a year." "Half a year?" "Yes, the fastest. The burns on his body are not light. I'll entrust the young master to you. If there's any situation, report it to me immediately." "Yes," the doctor replied. Just as he was about to return, Mother Yu shouted, "Wait." King Kong paused before he remembered that his daughter was still sick. He hurriedly asked the doctor to bring his first aid kit over. After hesitating for a moment, he also followed them. After entering the house, he saw Zhou Jiaying pacing around with the baby in her arms. The doctor went forward for a checkup. "Not a big problem. It's just that her stomach is a little bloated from eating cold food. Feed her some warm water and gently rub her stomach. Be more careful in the future. It is cold outside now, so you must not expose the child to the cold wind. Also, tell the nanny to be careful and to wait for her body to warm up before feeding her." After saying that, Eunuch Li turned around, went to the side hall, and began searching through the various memorials. Needless to say, the many documents were arranged neatly and were easy to search through. Soon, he found a scroll and hurriedly handed it to the emperor. "Your Highness, we didn't send anyone to supervise the construction. It was supervised by the local officials after the imperial court allocated funds." The emperor took the memorial and opened it carefully to examine it. Sure enough, he did not send anyone down at the time, but the local officers were from the Marquis of Dingan's faction or the people of the eldest prince. Yang Shicheng and Lord Bai from the Ministry of Works were also responsible for this matter. "Is there any news from Shaoheng over the past 2 days?" Since Chief Shao accepted the mission, he rarely re-entered the palace and didn't send any useful news. "It looks like they are well hidden." After the emperor finished speaking, he threw the memorial on his table. Chapter 576b worries. Zhou saw that the memorial had not been closed, so she immediately went forward to take a look. It was a memorial from the south asking for funds to strengthen the river embankment. Thinking back to the conversation, she suddenly understood why the emperor was angry. She glanced at the memorial, saw Yang Ziqing's name, and smiled. Yang Shiqing was not far from death. Should she push the emperor to act so Yang Shiqing won't cause any more trouble? There was also the first prince. He was one of the masterminds behind the deaths of her original body and Gu Shengruo's original body. Thinking of this, after the emperor fell asleep, she gave him another dream and told him about Yang Shiqing helping the first prince commit corruption. She also told him about the secret chamber in the Yang residence and the way to enter. After leaving, Zhou returned the thing she took from the secret chamber. She even returned the 100,000 taels of silver in the manner wholly intact. With this evidence, their doomsday would soon arrive. Just as she was lost in her thoughts, the emperor suddenly woke up with a head full of sweat. She was shocked by this and immediately left. Seeing it was getting late, she collected what she needed in her inner space and planted some corn. After she was done, she picked up a 5-pound watermelon and entered the villa. She sliced the watermelon and called Gu Qingrui down. You've been reading for some time. Eat a piece of watermelon and take a rest. Thanks, it's great that you thought of that. Gu Qingrui pulled her to sit down. He first handed her the middle piece before taking another piece and eating it. Zhou looked at the watermelon in her hand and smiled. She lowered her head and started eating. After eating, Zhou told him what she had seen and heard tonight and that she had returned Yang Shiqing's gold and silver. Great. It's revenge for our bodies. Gu Qingrui laughed after hearing that. He then asked, so the fourth prince has planted a spy in King Rui's residence? Isn't that normal? I'm sure King Rui has spies in the others' residences too. That's true. If he didn't have some tricks up his sleeve, he probably wouldn't have lived until today. I just wonder what the fourth prince's goal is. From my experience watching royal dramas, the most effective way to provoke two women to fight is to do something regarding their children, especially involving sterilization medicine. It will definitely make the two women fight to the death. Gu Qingrui only sighed and said, to put it bluntly, women and children are just sacrifices in politics. After saying that, he stood up and disposed of the melon skin. After that, they took a shower together and went out of the inner space to go to bed. When Zhou woke up again, the capital was in an uproar. The Yang family had been raided, all the family members had been captured, and the servants had been sold. The first prince was punished by personally reinforcing the South River embankment using his private coffers. The Marquis of Dingan's younger brother, Sun Wenhao, was also arrested and imprisoned, and Lord Bai from the Ministry of Works was also implicated. For a moment, the atmosphere in the capital became tense again. After dinner, Zhou was teaching Gu Wanning martial arts when she realized Gu Wanning was daydreaming. She went up and asked, something on your mind? I guess so. I really didn't expect my father to have embezzled so much money. Gu Wanning replied thoughtfully. In her previous life, even though Yang Shiqing also had his corruption exposed, they did not recover much of the stolen money. It seemed that it was all used up by those three women. The Cui family women lived a much more luxurious life, especially after Yang Wanyu married the first prince. Gu Wanning remembered that Yang Wanyu had said that the first prince doted on her by gifting them all those luxurious goods. Now that she thought about it, those weren't gifts from the first prince. Those were bought after Yang Shiqing finally dared to spend the embezzled money once the first prince gained power. At the thought of this, she felt aggrieved for her mother. Yang Shiqing's salary had been solely for his personal use for the past several years. Gu Wanning's mother never spent even a single penny he earned after marrying him. But her ending was. Chapter 577. A full stop. Just when Zhou Ying thought that Gu Wanning had softened her heart, Gu Wanning suddenly said, "Good. The more corrupted, the worse his outcome will be. Yup, since there's no more relationship between you two siblings can just live your own lives." "That's right, I still have Qinglin." Gu Wanning smiled. Her previous life had already become a dream that could not be repeated, so she needed to grasp this life and live it well. There was no need to think about those unpleasant things anymore. After that, the two practiced some martial arts and went out to buy her dowry. At the same time, Zhou Ying was also thinking about what kind of dowry to prepare. In King Kang's imperial residence, his expression turned grave when he considered what happened to King Hui. He knew that the emperor supervised this matter, so it seemed that he had to be more careful in the future. Otherwise, he would also land in a terrible position. Young Shiqing was beheaded 3 days later, and all his family members were exiled. Like the Gu family, the Bai family was raided and sent back to their hometown. Gu Wanning could not help but laugh. It would be impossible for Yang Wanyu to stand out now. At the same time, to relinquish the vengeance inside her, she brought Chuanxi over to take a look from afar. When she saw Yang Wanyu's miserable appearance with handcuffs and shackles on her body, she could not help but smile. She realized that only Yang Wanyu and her brother had no one sending them off or giving them clothes. She said happily to Chuanxi, "Let's go home and buy some meat. We'll have a good celebration tonight." "Oh, mistress, you aren't going to send them off." "No need. It's enough to see her in a sorry state." Gu Wanning shook her head. As for sending them off, she would just be mocking her. There was really no need for that. If word got out, it would be detrimental to her reputation. When Chuanxi heard this, she quickly walked back with her. In the blink of an eye, more than half a month had passed. It was also the day of King Kang's daughter's 1-month-old birthday. The night before, King Kong walked in and said, "Imperial father has decided on the naming convention for the next generation of girls. It would start with Lu." Mother gave the child the word Exayan, which meant prosperity. From now on, she will be called Yang Lexin. Lexin, a lovely name with a good meaning. Zhou Jiaying said, "Your Highness, no matter what, our daughter is the first child of her generation. Shouldn't the emperor bequeath her a title or something? Who would be given a title at birth? Moreover, she was not his legitimate daughter." It was already good enough that the emperor remembered that there was such a person. Of course, he only said this inwardly and not out loud. Why not? Isn't Mingyu one of them? Moreover, she's not even the emperor's flesh and blood. King Kong turned around and said with disdain, "Your ambition is inflating. Remember that I was only conferred the title of king last year. As for Mingyu, she's a special case." Back then, when King An followed imperial father out of the palace, he helped block an arrow and almost lost his life. After Consortin received the news, she gave birth prematurely and almost died with the baby. That was why Mingyu was given the title of princess. Do you think anyone can start at the top without any contributions? Zhou Jiaying felt her heart beating fast under his gaze. She hugged his arm and replied coquettishly, "I want to fight more for my daughter. Since it's impossible, then I won't suggest it again in the future. It's good that you remember. Mother will be here tomorrow, so be careful when you speak. If you make her unhappy, neither you nor your daughter will have a good time." After King Kong finished speaking, he pulled his arm out and walked out. "Farewell, Your Highness." Zhou Jiaying bowed immediately. After he walked far away, she looked at Mrs. Yu with an aggrieved expression and asked, "Mrs. Yu, do you think His Highness has a change of heart?" Chapter 578 Reflection. This servant can't be sure either. It's possible that he's angry because of what you said before. At this point, Mrs. Yu hesitated and added, Madam, I feel that you should try your best to serve His Highness and make him happy. As long as he's happy, there are many things that you don't need to ask for. In order to please you, he will give them to you. On the other hand, taking the initiative to ask would be counterproductive. Although Zhou Jiaying felt uncomfortable, she knew what she said made sense. Initially, she thought their relationship would never change, but over the past few months, she realized that he had changed. He had changed so much that she felt she was no different from any other woman to him. It seemed that she really had to reflect on herself. She could not imagine how they would live the rest of their lives if she lost favor. She said, Mrs. Yu, prepare my bath. Prepare the clothes and accessories that I will wear tomorrow. Yes, but your body is still weak. You must be careful not to hurt your body. Understood. Go and prepare. On the day of Yang Lexin's full moon, the Gu residence was invited because they had sold the greenhouse vegetables to King Kong. Zhou Ying had no choice but to bring Gu Wanning to King Kang's residence. After registering the 100 taels as their gift, they took the initiative to drink tea in a corner. Then, the royal family members began to arrive one after another. At this moment, Zhou Ying also discovered that King Kong had mainly invited royal family members. As for the ministers in the court, they were either relatives of the Marquis of Dingan or first-grade officials like Prime Minister Su or Grand Scholar Sunday. She was probably the only one of her kind who did not have an imperial mandate. When she saw this, she could not help but be on alert. Soon, Mrs. Sun sat down and said, You must be Mrs. Gu. Madam Sun sure has a good memory. I didn't expect that you would still recognize a commoner after only meeting once. It's mainly because you're too beautiful. It's hard not to remember you. I'll take it as a compliment. Mrs. Sun was stunned for a moment and smiled. It is a compliment. I heard that Lord Gus' greenhouse has begun to produce vegetables. Is that true? Yes, but there are only leafy vegetables now. They will appear at the banquet later. That's great. I wonder if you can send some to my residence. I haven't eaten fresh vegetables in a long time. No problem, but the quantity is limited. I'm afraid I can only let you have a taste. Just send as many as you can. Mrs. Sun nodded. At this moment, Consortin walked over. Madam Sun immediately stood up and went to chat with Gu Wanning. What surprised Zhou Ying was that Consortin also mentioned sending vegetables. Don't you also grow vegetables in your hot spring manor? Zhou Ying asked in confusion. How much can we plant? Besides, there are many owners of that manor. We barely get a share of the produce. That's true, but there's a limit to what's grown in the greenhouse too. I'm afraid we can't give too many. I understand. Please send over as many as you can. Following that, many more came asking for vegetables. Zhou Ying finally understood what Heartwarming meant. As long as the news was released, the vegetables would sell like hotcakes. However, she replied to all of them with the same thing and did not dare boast about her produce. Conversely, Mrs. Sun chatted with Gu Wanning for a while. Seeing that she had a gentle personality and did not like to gossip too much, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. After all, the Gu couple were very close to King Rui. Now that Gu Wanning had changed her surname, she could be considered a real member of the Gu family. If she had a stubborn personality, her daughter would not have an easy time in the future. Chapter 579 Jealous. Soon, Sun Miaoke also arrived. Mrs. Sun exchanged a few more polite words with Gu Wanning before going to look for her daughter. After a while, Zhou Jiaying came in with her daughter in her arms. Mrs. Yu, Mother Zhou, and Zhou Jiaqing followed behind. When everyone saw that the baby had arrived, they immediately went forward and gave their small gifts. When it was Zhou Ying's turn, she took out a small gold bracelet engraved with the word "Fortune" and handed it to Mrs. Yu. "I hope Miss Lexin will be blessed in the future." "Thank you." Zhou Jiaying laughed. After that, she took a serious look at Zhou Ying. Although Zhou Ying was dressed in the simplest clothes, she found her skin fair and supple. Her hair was black and luscious, indicating that she was living a very comfortable life. Zhou Ying's eyes were clear, revealing tenacity and guile. She looked completely different from the Zhou Ying back then. It was no wonder Zhou Jiaqing had no advantage in her hands. At the same time, a sense of jealousy rose in her heart. Her status was clearly higher than Zhou Ying's, and she was married into a better family. Yet, her life was not as comfortable as Zhou Ying's. At this time, Zhou Jiaying's mother and Zhou Jiaqing, who were helping Zhou Jiaying greet the others, also returned. Zhou Ying smiled and nodded at Mother Zhou, then turned around and left. Zhou Jiaqing wanted to chase after her, but Mother Zhou stopped her. Zhou Ying was no longer the same person she was. Moreover, since the old madam had already clarified that they no longer had any relationship with each other, there was no need for them to find trouble. Although Zhou Jiaqing was indignant, she didn't say anything else. Soon, Consort Shu arrived, and everyone hurriedly stood up and bowed. "Everyone, get up." After Consort Shu finished speaking, she turned around and hugged Yang Lexin, saying, "Ah, our little darling is awake. Look at those big, watery eyes. They're so beautiful. Indeed, this child's eyes are like yours." Zhou Jiaying laughed. "Oh, please." Consort Shu smiled. "It's the truth. Your eyes are publicly recognized as the most beautiful of all." Zhou Jiaying added. "This child's face is similar to Jiaying's. She has a pair of dimples on her small oval face and looks so cute when she smiles." Mrs. Su stepped forward with a smile. When everyone heard this, they surrounded the child and praised her. Zhou Ying saw this and quickly went to the side to continue drinking her tea. In the afternoon, after everyone had left, Zhou Jiaqing looked at Mother Zhou and asked, "Mom, Zhou Ying was so arrogant before. Why didn't you let me teach her a lesson? You're just too impulsive when you've suffered before. Besides, your grandmother has already helped us draw a clear line with her, so don't provoke her. Otherwise, when something happens, the ones who will lose face will be us. Indeed, you really have to change your personality. Besides, quarrels can't solve our problems, and you are only making yourself more angry." Zhou Jiaying nodded in agreement. Moreover, she had already found the best way to vent her anger. She would destroy Zhou Ying's happy life when the time was right. "You should learn more from your sister. Otherwise, when you get married in the future, you'll suffer." Mother Zhou chided her. "You guys. I'm going to see Lexin." Seeing that none of them took her seriously, Zhou Jiaqing snorted in dissatisfaction and ran out. Zhou Jiaying shook her head and asked, "Mother, is there any progress on her marriage? Why don't we just find a stable, honest, wealthy family for her? With her personality, she won't have a good life in the future if it isn't a family we can suppress. She might even bring trouble to our family." Chapter 580 Royal Family's Banquet 1. Your father had the same idea. He said he has a subordinate who runs a pharmacy and comes from a good family. He wanted to discuss this matter once his subordinate came to the capital to deliver medicine in the spring. Mother Zhou then asked, "By the way, how are things on your side? His Highness doesn't mind that the baby is a daughter, right?" "Not really." "That's good. Your mother has lived most of her life understanding one thing. Fighting for favor isn't to suppress other women, but to keep a man's heart. As long as his heart is still with you, you don't have to be afraid of anything. In the future, you should pay more attention to him, go along with him more, and give in sometimes. Don't blindly compete and win over others. Or else, you'll lose his heart like your mother. I will remember it. Zhou Jiaying nodded. After that, the mother and daughter chatted more before Mother Zhou brought Zhou Jiaqing home. In the evening, Zhou Ying told Gu Qingrui about the orders by the various families and asked, "How are things on your side? If you don't have enough to sell to all of them, I can take some out of interspace to make up for it." "Don't, I will harvest as much as I can. I will just send less to each family, or else if our harvest doesn't match, the people in the manor will be suspicious. But I won't bring any vegetables back to our residence. If you want to eat some, you need to tell me in advance, and I'll bring some over before shipping everything away." "Alright, hurry up and send them over. We can still plant another batch before the new year." "Yeah." Gu Qingrui nodded. For the next 2 days, Gu Qingrui delivered vegetables to the various residences, including the Imperial Palace, and planted another batch of vegetables. Zhou Ying continued teaching Gu Wanning martial arts and helped her prepare her dowry. She would head to her manor or Yang Chenglin's manor when bored. She requested they keep some livestock cubs, especially pigs, in preparation for next year. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the year, and they sold yet another batch of leafy vegetables. At the same time, Sun Hongliang sent someone to deliver a pig, 2 sheep, and a cow through King Rui's men. Zhou Ying asked Lin Yitian to send half a pig to their manor after receiving the livestock. After Gu Qingrui found out that Zhou Huaiming had returned to the capital, he invited him to spend the new year at his house every day except for the eve of the new year. As a result, Zhou Huaiming gained more than 10 pounds in half a month. On the 15th, at the imperial family's Lantern Festival banquet, everyone was surprised to see him all fattened. King Rui patted his shoulder and said, "Cousin, if you continue to eat like this, be careful that you won't even be able to hold your sword in the future. Speaking of which, it's all Miss Zhou's fault. If it weren't for the fact that her cooking is so delicious, I wouldn't have stuffed myself full every time." Humble brag. Hee, I really can't help it. It's too delicious. Zhou Huaiming said with an awkward smile before turning serious, "Oh right, I heard that the scale of this banquet is large. Even officials from other places who came to the capital to take the examination have been invited. Is the emperor planning something huge?" "Not really. I heard that the main purpose of this banquet is to treat everyone to a meal and discuss this year's plans, especially the promotion of sweet potatoes and greenhouses." "Are you referring to the greenhouse vegetables? I heard that Gu Qingrui delivered half of the harvest to the palace." "Yes, no matter what, the successful planting of greenhouse vegetables has solved the problem of eating vegetables in winter in the north. It's worth promoting to great lengths." "Great to hear." Zhou Huaiming let out a sigh of relief. "Let's go. Follow me to the emperor's study to report this year's deployment." After saying that, King Rui walked straight to the study. Zhou Huaiming immediately followed after him. Zhou Ying brought Gu Wanning into the palace, and she headed to visit the Empress Dowager. Because there were too many people, she only exchanged a few polite greetings before following Princess Mingyu to the side hall. Chapter 581 Royal Family's Banquet 2. As soon as the 3 of them entered, a white-haired old woman said in a strange tone, "Hey, isn't this the second daughter of the Zhou family, Zhou Ying? I heard that she fell out with her family the moment she returned to the capital. No matter what, the Zhou family raised you. You can't just ignore your family when your wings harden." Zhou Ying turned her head to look at her after hearing that. She then ignored her after she noticed who it was. It was the Empress' second aunt, the great-aunt of the Liu family. Previously, because the Liu family had previously helped Prince Hui in his assassination attempt on Prince Rui, they had been grounded for 3 months. Zhou didn't expect them to be out so soon. However, looking at the murderous aura on her body, she must have killed many people. Seeing that she was ignoring her, Madame Lu immediately demanded angrily, "What, you don't even know how to respect the old and love the young? Are you worthy of that?" Zhou said with a cold glance. I'm already respecting you by ignoring you. Don't forget why you were grounded by the Emperor. Do you need me to help you spread the news?" Madame Lu was so angry that she trembled and pointed at her but could not say a word. Mingyu looked at the two of them and quickly said, "Let's go somewhere else." After saying that, she pulled them to the other side halls. "Tell me, do you still respect your elders? You're simply too condescending." Madame Lu pointed at their backs and shouted. However, everyone just casually responded with a few grunts to give the Empress face before ignoring her. After all, even the Zhou family did not care about Zhou Ying's situation. What grounds do they have to stick their hands into this? Besides, they wanted to buy more vegetables from the Gu family. If they offended Zhou Ying, where else would they get their vegetables? Seeing this, Madame Lu was embarrassed and immediately stood up to leave. The moment she left, everyone started gossiping. Some said she used to bully others, while others began digging into her past and describing how she had stepped over corpses to rise from a concubine to her husband's official wife. Madame Lu, who was listening outside the halls, was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She quickly went to look for the Empress and her sister-in-law. On the other end, after Zhou Ying and the others left, they did not go to the other side halls. Instead, they went outside to look at the lanterns. Although the sky was not dark, the colorful lanterns were still attractive. "Wow, that little white rabbit is so beautiful." Mingyu pointed at a lantern hanging on a plum blossom tree. "Yeah, it's very cute. It looks like she's stealing food." Gu Wanning echoed. Zhou Ying stepped forward and took a good look, admiring these crafts, especially the picture painted on them. With just a few simple strokes, these craftsmen had drawn a cute little rabbit on a delicate lantern. She asked, "Will there be more lanterns on the street outside tonight?" "I'm not too sure about that. Because of the disaster, there hasn't been a lantern festival for 2 years. Oh, right. I heard that Qingshui town in Yunhe County had a fireworks festival. Is that true?" Mingyu asked. "Yeah, I saw it once on the second day after I went back. It was very beautiful, but there was a sea of people at the festival. It was a pity that the fireworks were short-lived, unlike a lantern that could leave something behind." Zhou Ying then gave them a detailed description of the festival. "Wow, it sounds beautiful and shocking. I'll go and take a look when the year is better," Mingyu said excitedly. "You're making me want to go too." Gu Wanning echoed. "If there's a chance in the future, I'll treat you guys to a big meal and watch fireworks." "Yo, what are you girls talking about so happily?" At this moment, a curious voice came from not far away. Chapter 582 Royal Family's Banquet 3. Zhou Ying turned around and frowned when she saw Consort Shu, Zhou Jiaying, and Zhou Jiaqing. However, the three of them still quickly stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, Consort Shu." Zhou Ying and Gu Wanning also greeted Zhou Jiaying. "Do get up. What were you guys talking about just now?" Consort Shu helped them up and asked with a smile. "It's nothing much. We were mainly talking about the rabbit lantern and then about the fireworks in Sister Zhou's hometown." Mingyu replied. "I've heard King Kong mention the fireworks over there before, they're indeed one of a kind." Consort Shu nodded. "I heard that Mingyu has already started training female soldiers. How are the results?" "It's still too short for results, and they are still practicing the horse dance. I'm afraid it'll take a year and a half to see any effect." That's true. Sorry, I was just too impatient. Consort Shu nodded and asked Zhou, I heard that the greenhouse was successful. I wonder what vegetables are being harvested this time. Well, other than the leafy vegetables we harvested previously, there are also cucumbers, beans, tomatoes, eggplants, cucumbers, pumpkins, carrots, and so on. Good. There are both thick and thin vegetables. Looks like we're going to have a good meal tonight. Zhou smiled and did not reply. You guys go ahead and stroll around. Shall we go and see the other lanterns? Mingyu asked. Go ahead. There's a lotus lantern over there that's very well made. You can go over and take a look. After Consort Shu finished speaking, she pointed to the left. Thank you for your guidance, Consort Shu. After Mingyu finished speaking, she immediately led the two of them away. After they left, Consort Shu turned her head to look at Zhou Ying's back and said with a smile, I didn't expect that pitiful girl back then would turn out this well. Ping Yang sure has a good eye. The two sisters felt uncomfortable after hearing this. What did Consort Shu mean by pitiful? Was she implying that the Zhou family abused Zhou Ying? If it weren't for her status, Zhou Jiaying would have retorted. Zhou Jiaqing muttered indignantly, what's the use of a concubine's daughter who has no one to rely on, no matter how good she looks? Consort Shu glanced at her after hearing this and was too lazy to pay attention to her. She turned her head to look at Zhou Jiaying. Seeing that she was submissive and didn't show any dissatisfaction, Consort Shu nodded. No matter what Zhou Jiaying was thinking, it was fine as long as she did not show it or embarrass her son. She stood up and was about to leave when a few girls walked over and bowed. Greetings, Consort Shu. When Consort Shu saw the leading Hong Suji, she immediately smiled and said, hurry up and rise. Since we've met, let's take a walk together. Yes. Hong Suji responded and followed. Consort Shu looked at her and asked, when did you enter the palace? Is your mother here? We just arrived not long ago. Mother is still at the Empress Dowager's place. We wanted to pay you a visit, and we didn't expect to meet you here. This is fate. Consort Shu smiled. Then, they chatted and laughed, completely isolating the Zhou sisters. Hong Suzi's sisters also took the opportunity to squeeze the two sisters to the sidelines gradually. But Zhou Jiaying didn't dare to say anything. Seeing this, Zhou Jiaqing was indignant and ran off to look for her friends. Zhou Jiaying gritted her teeth in anger when she saw her adding insult to injury. She could only step forward and say, Imperial Mother, it's been quite a while since we've come out. I have to go and take a look at the child, so please go without me. She hoped Consort Shu would give her some face for the sake of her child. Unexpectedly, Consort Shu waved her hand and said, Go, the child is still young. Don't let her catch a cold. Chapter 584 Royal Family's Banquet 5. Not at the moment. Zhou Ying has already helped me prepare most of what I need. If there is anything else, I will look for you again. Alright, don't stand on ceremony. As the three of them chatted, many more guests walked in one after another. However, most of them were women and young ladies, and there were also some young boys. Soon, more than half of the tent was occupied, and the chattering almost sounded like a market. Zhou Ying curiously spread out her divine senses to look and found that most of them were matchmaking for their children, especially the madams who weren't from the capital. They were all trying their best to promote their children for engagement. Many people even enjoyed watching this. At this moment, Zhou Ying thought of something. She looked at Mingyu and asked, Mingyu, how old are you this year? Mingyu, who was drinking tea, was surprised by the sudden question. I'm 17 after the day of the Lunar New Year. What's wrong? 17. Why didn't consort and get you ready for your marriage? My marriage has to be approved by the emperor, but since the emperor has not mentioned it, my father did not dare to ask. He has to ask soon. If you delay any longer, all the good men of your age will be snatched away. It will be difficult to find a suitable one by then. Gu Waning's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. She immediately remembered Mingyu's miserable ending in her previous life. Even though the sudden change in King Rui had changed the political situation in this life, who knew if the emperor would still use Mingyu for a marriage alliance? Thinking of this, she nodded in agreement and said, "Indeed, the emperor is always busy, and he's also a man. Perhaps he didn't take this matter to heart. You and your father should choose a few candidates and report to the emperor. If it's suitable, he will definitely agree to your marriage." Mingyu blushed and nodded. 111 Mention it to my mother later. I think you should mention it to your grandmother too. Shouing added. No matter what, the Empress Dowager and Madame Consort were friends. It was safer for her to come forward compared to Consort, and Mingyu understood what Zhouing meant. She nodded and said, I understand. Seeing this, Zhouing did not say anything more. She simply poured another cup of tea and drank it. A moment later, a mother and daughter walked over and bowed. Greetings, Princess Mingyu. Mingyu glanced at them. After confirming that they did not know each other, she raised her head and replied, Do raise your heads, there's no need to be so polite. Thank you, Princess. After the two of them got up, the woman looked at Zhouing and asked, Are you Mrs. Gu? You are. I'm the wife of Lord Zhao of the Kaiyang Prefecture. This is my daughter, Zhao Xiuli. The woman introduced herself. Zhouing looked at them in surprise. Although they had never met before, they were technically considered enemies. For a moment, she could not figure out why they had come. What's the matter? She asked directly. Madame Zhao looked at her vigilant gaze and smiled awkwardly. I know because of Zhouing, Zhouing directly interrupted her. Just say what you're here for. Madame Zhao did not speak but looked at Mingyu and Gu Waning. Mingyu looked at Zhouing. Zhouing hesitated for a moment and nodded. She wanted to see what the mother and daughter wanted from her. Let's go, Waning, accompany me to the toilet. Gu Waning grabbed Zhou Ying's hand. Noticing that Zhouing had just squeezed back, she got up and walked out. Only then did Zhouing invite the mother and daughter to sit down. If you have something to say it now. After Madame Zhao sat down, she tilted her head and whispered, I want to work with you and your husband to take down Zhao. When they arrived outside and found a remote place, Zhouing heard Miss Zhao ask in panic, Mother, what should we do? She won't help us. If it really doesn't work, we can only go all out and report him. No, Mother, we will lose our lives. Fine, let's die together. The three of us can't become their stepping stones. Otherwise, I won't die in peace. But Madame Zhao tidied her daughter's clothes and said, if it really doesn't work out, you must change your appearance and escape. Mother has had enough of these aggrieved days. Mother, all right, take advantage of the fact that they are not watching us now. Hurry up and leave the palace or else it will be too late. But, go. If possible, remember to go back and bring your brother out. After Madame Zhao finished speaking, she gave her a roll of banknotes. Chapter 586 Royal Family's Banquet 7. Miss Zhao hesitated for a moment but still took the money. The mother and daughter knocked out a palace maid resembling Miss Zhao. Miss Zhao quickly changed into the palace maid's clothes and ran toward another palace. When Madame Zhao returned, she saw two nannies in a hurry from afar. She panicked and immediately quickened her pace, but she was quickly stopped by a young eunuch, who handed her over to two nannies. One of the older nannies asked directly, "Where's Miss Zhao?" "She went to relieve herself." Madame Zhao replied expressionlessly. "Liar." After the old nanny finished speaking, she pushed her toward the young nanny and said, "Take her away and lock her up." The young nanny nodded and took out a dagger. While holding on to Madame Zhao, she pressed against her lower back with the dagger. Meanwhile, the elderly nanny brought the young eunuch and a few palace maids to look for Miss Zhao. When they found the clothes Miss Zhao had left behind and the fainted palace maid, the others continued searching while the young eunuch hurriedly ran to the empress. Zhou Ying was a little confused when she saw this. What did Madame Zhao know that could make the empress so wary of her? And that Miss Zhao, was she really meant to be a palace maid? Zhou Ying refused to believe it. Thinking of this, she began to scan Madame Zhao. She must have evidence of something since she wanted to report to the emperor. Otherwise, how else would she plead for help? Sure enough, there was a small pocket sewn on the inside of Madame Zhao's undergarment. There was a folded piece of paper inside. She immediately stored it in her interspace. Otherwise, it would definitely be destroyed if it were discovered. Zhou Ying took the opportunity to go to the toilet and entered her interspace. She quickly browsed through the evidence that Madame Zhao had written. She did not expect that this was evidence of Lord Zhao helping the first prince with various corruptions and crimes. One of the things that shocked her the most was killing officials with exemplary political achievements and then replacing them with someone else, just like Lord Sunday. Lord Zhao's residence was basically filled with the first prince's people. No wonder the servants of the Zhao residence dared to be so arrogant. There were also some cases of corruption and seizing the property of those who refused to collaborate. This was simply appalling. No, she couldn't let Madame Zhao die. Otherwise, it would be challenging to prove many of their crimes. Thinking of this, Zhou Ying immediately left the room and found Madame Zhao through her divine sense. She was imprisoned in a storeroom, which was filled with porcelain ornaments. Knowing Madame Zhao was not in danger for the time being, Zhou Ying went to look for Miss Zhao. Miss Zhao got lucky. She found a set of clothes that looked old and torn. After wearing it, she seemed to have aged by more than 10 years. Miss Zhao was now heading into a tunnel. As for where it led to, Zhou Ying couldn't tell as it was dark and long inside. However, it was enough to know that she was fine. As Zhou Ying walked back, she looked at the emperor. He was currently with Gu Qingrui, emphasizing how to spread the new farming methods to the officials outside quickly. While the emperor was drinking tea, Zhou Ying used the voice of Mother God to send a message to him. The emperor was stunned. When he remembered the 2 times Mother God had entered his dream, his hands couldn't help but tremble, and he almost spilled the tea in his hands. He got up and said, "You guys continue discussing. I'll be back soon." After saying that, he called Eunuch Li to the side hall and asked him to guard the entrance. The emperor knelt and whispered, "Mother God, what advice do you have?" Zhou Ying didn't reply. Instead, she just sent the piece of paper over through her interspace. The emperor saw the paper heart floating in his hand and opened it to read. The more he read, the more ashen his face became. In the end, he angrily punched the ground. Chapter 587 Royal Family Banquet 8. Zhou Ying saw that the emperor had finished reading and then told him about the situation of Madame Zhao and her daughter and where they were now. She stayed silent once she finished what she had to say. The emperor immediately kowtowed and said, "Thank you for your guidance, Mother God." After saying that, he stood up and kept the evidence. Then, he asked Eunuch Li to bring all the officials to the banquet. He went to find Xiao Heng and personally went to Madame Zhao. Of course, the Empress people were also imprisoned on the spot. He later also called for Miss Zhao to come over. After handing them over to Xiao Heng, he returned to the banquet. When Zhou Ying returned, Mingyu and Gu Wanning were back in their seats. Seeing her return, they asked curiously, "Why did they look for you just now?" Zhou Ying didn't hide, and she told them the reason for their visit. Of course, she only told them that Madame Zhao wanted to join forces with her to deal with Lord Zhao. As for the other stuff she found by herself, she didn't mention it one bit. "You didn't agree, did you?" Gu Wanning asked. "I'm not stupid. To put it bluntly, she's planning to use me. Of course, I won't be stupid enough to let her take advantage of that. Besides, when she held power back then, she didn't stop Zhao Xiuying from snatching Zi's husband. Why should I help her now? It's right for you to reject her. To be honest, she's just a backstabber." Back then, she enjoyed everything with a clear conscience. Now that it's her turn to fall from grace, she wanted to turn around and stab her husband. Believe it or not, if you agree, she will blame you if anything happens in the future. Zhou Ying nodded in agreement. At this time, Eunuch Li had already walked in with a group of officials. However, they did not disperse immediately. After discussing something for a while, they went back to their seats. Mingyu immediately got up and said, "All right, I have to go back immediately." She returned to her seat in King An's imperial residence. Gu Qingrui sat down and asked, "Are you guys okay? Did you get bullied?" "Don't worry. With Princess Mingyu around, no one will dare to cause trouble for us." "Yeah, don't worry, cousin. We're fine. It must be hard on you to deal with so many people. Hurry up and drink some tea." After Gu Wanning finished speaking, she took a teacup and poured him some tea. "Thank you." Gu Qingrui thanked her and continued, "Actually, it's nothing much. It's just letting them know about some new farming techniques. I will organize it into a booklet later. When the time comes, everyone will have a copy, so I don't have to explain it to them individually. This is a good idea. If it works, it can be passed down from generation to generation. It'll help you with that later. All right, let's write together." Gu Wanning looked at them and was envious of their relationship, but she knew it would never happen to her. She could only hope that she could continue to get along with her husband in the future. Soon, the Emperor, Empress, and Empress Dowager rushed over. After bowing, everyone sat down, and the Emperor quickly announced, "We've discussed most of what we need to do before this. When you return, remember to write a proposal into a memorial and submit it to me. Remember, everyone only has 2 missions this year. First, promote food as soon as possible so that starving isn't a thing as soon as possible. Secondly, encourage the birth of children. Women who were not married at the age of 18 could be forced to marry." "We will obey." Everyone immediately replied. "All right, the banquet has started. Everyone, have a good meal today and let us know how greenhouse vegetables taste." After the Emperor finished speaking, he asked Eunuch Li to arrange for the dishes to be served. Chapter 588 The Emperor's Might 1. Because today's banquet was mainly to taste the greenhouse dishes, all the dishes were relatively light. The oiliest was the fried eggplant. Fortunately, the main staple was fried pancakes, so everyone was more or less filled. When everyone was almost done eating, the Emperor stood up and said, "Everyone, tell me, what do you think of the greenhouse vegetables? Relatively speaking, the vegetables' taste is slightly mild, but it's good enough that we could eat such fresh vegetables in the middle of winter." The Empress Dowager replied, "Indeed, we must plant more leafy vegetables in the hot spring manner in winter. Vegetables are too rare in the winter." King Xian echoed. With the 2 of them speaking out, everyone followed suit. Everyone praised the greenhouse vegetables to the heavens and wanted to buy more to satisfy their cravings. So let's spread the planting methods as soon as possible. You can still plant a batch when you return to your county. Maybe at most, it would be slightly young when it's time for harvest. The emperor looked at Gu Qingrui and added, would have to trouble Minister Gu to teach them more over the next 2 days and bring them around your manor. This is my duty and my honor. In addition, I plan to make a booklet teaching the planting techniques of the white potato and how to build a greenhouse. This way, this knowledge can be spread faster and wider. Good, good. All right, everyone, hurry up and get to work. When the time comes, I will find someone to help you print the booklets. The emperor quickly added, it's getting late, so you all can leave the banquet anytime. After saying that, the emperor left. Zhou Jiaying was a bit anxious about the emperor's series of actions. Why didn't he say anything else except eating and working? It was not easy for her to seize an opportunity to make things difficult for Zhou, but it slipped away just like that. King Kong noticed her abnormality and warned her, Father isn't in a good mood today, so don't go looking for trouble. Otherwise, even I can't save you. No, I just feel that today's banquet ended too quickly. That better be the case. Let's hurry back. King Kong stood up. After the guests left one after another, the emperor directly brought guards to imprison the empress in her palace. After the empress received the news, she looked at the emperor in disbelief and asked, Your Highness, what did I do wrong? Why are you imprisoning me? You don't know. Think about it carefully. After the emperor finished speaking, he left the guards behind and brought her aides and Madame Zhao into the study to interrogate them. Madame Zhao didn't need to be interrogated, and she told the emperor everything she knew. She kowtowed and begged, I know I'm guilty of my silence and should not have kept quiet all this time. But my children are really in the dark about this. Your Highness, I beg you to give them a way out. Do you know how King Hui and Lord Zhao communicate? Through a messenger pigeon, but am not clear about the specifics. I was never privy to the details. I hope what you said is true. The emperor nodded and took the empress' aides. Because of Madame Zhao's confession, they also quickly confessed. To put it bluntly, the empress knew the emperor didn't favor her and wanted to bring in a beautiful young girl to help her maintain the emperor's favor. As for the rest, it was some other private matter. The emperor more or less knew about it, so there was no need to interrogate them further. He then commanded Xiao Heng to execute the aides. On the other side, Lord Zhao had just boarded his carriage when he was struck on the back of his neck and fainted. After everyone had left, Lord Zhao was brought directly to the royal study. The emperor looked at the unconscious Lord Zhao and asked the guard beside him, did any news of this leak? Chapter 589 The Emperor's Might, 2, Not at the moment. Go bring some men to their residence and bring the eldest son of the Zhao family over. Roger that. The guard responded and turned to leave. Seeing this, Eunuch Li took a cup of cold water and splashed it on Lord Zhao's face. Lord Zhao woke up with a jolt. When he saw the emperor standing before him, he was deeply shocked. He quickly knelt and kowtowed, Long live the emperor, all hail, all right, I heard you loud and clear. But I'm sure you can't wait for me to die as soon as possible. When Lord Zhao heard this, he instantly broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly replied, I wouldn't dare. No, you're very daring. After the emperor said this, he pulled out the complaint Madame Zhao wrote and threw it in his face. After Lord Zhao took it, he hurriedly took a look. With just one glance, he felt his view darkening, and his mind blanked out, he fainted immediately. The emperor understood when he saw that what was written on it was 80% true. Thinking of this, he went up and kicked him. When Lord Zhao woke up, the emperor demanded seriously, tell me everything you've done all these years, and maybe I can give you a way out. Lord Zhao didn't feel relieved. Instead, he wanted to cry. Because he clearly knew that even if he confessed and the Emperor did not kill him, the first prince and Marquis Dingon would not let him off either. In the end, he would still die. The Emperor looked at his expression and knew what he was thinking. He sneered and questioned, "Do you think that I'm inferior to King Hui and that I can't even protect your family's lives?" "No. You only have one chance. I have to give an explanation to the families of those officials who died unjustly. Otherwise, I will execute your entire family." Lord Xiao completely wilted after hearing this. He wiped his tears and asked, "If I confess, can you spare my children? As long as they didn't participate, I'll spare their lives. I swear that they really don't know, and I never dare to let them know. So, tell me." To start, it was 10 years ago when I was promoted. After washing up, Zhou sat by the bed and applied hand cream as she sighed. No wonder everyone is fighting to the death for that chair under the Emperor's butt. That power can be useful when it needs to. From what you're saying, something must have happened. Gu Qingrui put down his book, turned around, and put his arm around her shoulder. Of course, and it's a big deal. It's much bigger than Yang Shiqing's corruption. Zhou replied mysteriously. Gu Qingrui smiled and kissed her deeply on the lips. "You should tell me now." "Maybe, but I want to drink a bowl of white fungus lotus seed soup tonight." "No problem, leave it to me." Zhou leaned into his arms and whispered about how Madame Zhao had found her and how Lord Zhao had confessed. Gu Qingrui gasped after hearing that. If he remembers correctly, 10 to 12 counties were under Lord Zhao's influence. In other words, they had killed 3 to 4 7th-grade county magistrates with outstanding achievements. Lord Zhao wouldn't be the only one falling this time. The first prince would probably be gone as well. He hugged her and kissed her. "Fortunately, you didn't openly agree to cooperate with Madame Zhao today. Otherwise, we would have been dragged into the mud by her. I'm not stupid. If it weren't for the fact that what happened was so major, I wouldn't have bothered. Yes, my wife is the smartest." Chapter 590 Betrothal 1. The couple entered Zhou Ying's interspace. While she checked out the various places she usually checked, she paid special attention to the officials there this time. She realized that quite a number of people had been impersonated, even King Kong had begun to do similar things. She couldn't help but sigh. It seems that King Rui is the most stupid. However, no matter how much she lamented, she could not take action directly. Instead, she collected a list of names and especially focused on the 2 disguise artists. Then, through her interspace, she handed it to the Emperor. The next day, when the Emperor saw the name list, he felt his scalp go numb and almost fainted. At the same time, the Emperor also realized that they couldn't deal with this matter openly. Otherwise, the royal family would lose the people's faith. At the thought of this, a wave of fatigue washed over him. He removed King Hui and King Kong from the list of heirs, as such unscrupulous behavior definitely shouldn't inherit the throne. Otherwise, the Yang family's empire would be destroyed in his hands. After pondering for a while, he changed his way of handling Lord Zhao. He made him stay in the capital to help Gu Qingrui promote greenhouses and sweet potatoes. The Emperor chose another trusted aide for Kaiyang Prefecture. At the same time, he gave them a hidden mission, which was to find an opportunity in private to get rid of those spies openly and pull those who could be roped in. Over the next 3 days, the Emperor continuously sent his people to various places and began to slowly pull out the nails his sons had embedded. Gu Qingrui was also getting busy showing the local officials around the greenhouses. He also had his hands full selling the greenhouse vegetables to them. He came to the realization that their supply wouldn't be able to cope with demand, so he took some vegetables out of Zhou Ying's interspace and supplied them to the palace. Of course, this purchase would no longer go through the account books. The first month of the new year ended as the couple slogged through their work. On the second day of February, King Rui personally brought Butler Feng and the official media to present his betrothal gift to Gu Wanning. Gu Qingrui, waiting at home, stepped forward and cupped his fists to welcome them into the residence. After entering the house, he called for King Rui to sit down and said, "Your Highness, I am grateful that you are willing to personally come." King Rui glanced at him and replied, "I'm marrying my wife." "Isn't that what I should do?" Gu Qingrui nodded. "I guess I'll be your brother-in-law soon." "Yeah, but don't expect me to call you big brother." "It's fine. Just admitting it in your heart is enough." "Oh right, I heard from my cousin that you planted another kind of crop called red sweet potato. What's the difference between it and the white sweet potatoes?" It was a crop bequeathed to me when I went to the Mother God temple for prayers. It looks like a white potato, but it's relatively small. The core is red and especially sweet. It's a crop that needs more water, but it's very delicious when roasted." King Rui nodded after hearing this. "Leave some seeds for me later. The white potatoes are too dry sometimes. I'll just give you the crops when they mature." "Alright, I don't need too much. 1 acre of seedlings is enough." "Understood. I'll hand it over to Uncle Feng." At this moment, Gu Wanning came in with a pot of tea and bowed. "Greetings, Your Highness, brother cousin." "No need to be so polite." King Rui nodded. He looked at Gu Wanning and realized she had rosier cheeks than when she was in the Yang family. Her skin was fair and glowing. It was obvious that she was living quite well here. He asked, "Do you have any special requirements for the furnishings in your room?" "No incense and no flowers," Gu Wanning answered with a red face. King Rui looked at her in surprise and knew she was being cautious. He then nodded and replied, "Got it. Thank you, Your Highness." You guys continue chatting while I'll go prepare lunch. Yang Wanning politely greeted the matchmaker sitting beside her, then turned around and left. Chapter 591 Betrothal 2. Outside, Zhou counted the dowry with Mrs. Zhou, Mrs. Sun, Kuehua, and Shizhu. After finishing, she looked up at Butler Feng and said, "Uncle Feng, I've finished counting. I'm relieved. You guys go ahead. I'll go back now." After Butler Feng finished speaking, he turned around and was about to leave. Zhou quickly stopped him. "Wait. You've helped us a lot before. It's not easy for you to come to visit us, especially on such a joyous occasion. How can you leave?" "But no buts. As long as no one dies, there's nothing more urgent than this. It's the same if you go back early after having a meal." After saying that, Zhou directly helped him into the house. She said to Gu Qingrui, "Rui, I'm leaving Uncle Feng with you. I'm going to cook now." "Okay, remember to make some shredded radish salad." Gu Qingrui stood up and said, "Got it." Zhou turned around and left after that. Gu Qingrui guided Uncle Feng to sit and poured him a glass of water. Uncle Feng looked at King Rui with a troubled expression. Seeing this, King Rui nodded and said, "Do stay, Uncle Feng. It's rare for you to get a chance to taste Mrs. Gus cooking." "All right." Uncle Feng sat down with a clear conscience. Gu Qingrui said, "If Your Highness likes to eat Ying's dishes, you can come over more often in the future. She has nothing much to do now and is quite free." "I will." King Rui nodded. However, the problem wasn't whether Zhou was busy or not. He's getting busy, and it was inconvenient for him to come. After Zhou entered the kitchen, she saw that Gu Wanning was trying her best to slice the radish. She went forward and said, "You don't have to be so careful." It's much easier to shred the radish after you flatten one side. In addition, when pressing the ingredients with your left hand, your fingers must dig deeper, or else it would be easy to cut it. After saying that, she demonstrated it to Gu Wanning again. After ensuring she learned it, she quickly peeled the outer skin and shredded it. Zhou then soaked it in light salt water. She walked to Biaozi, who was processing the fish, and said, "Brother Biaozi, it'll be cooking today, so you watch carefully from the side. If you can't remember anything, write it down in your notebook." When the restaurant opened, these dishes would be on the menu. "All right, I will definitely study hard." Biaozi nodded solemnly. At the same time, he was very grateful to Zhou. He knew that in this era, all craftsmanship was passed down to the younger generation. Even teachers were unwilling to teach their apprentices anything. There were very few people like Zhou who didn't hide anything. Biaozi knew he couldn't miss this opportunity. After all the ingredients were prepared, Zhou explained to him step by step how to cook these dishes, especially how he should control the flames. Gu Wanning also took a notebook and listened earnestly. Zhou made a total of 10 dishes and 1 soup, which symbolized perfection. They were squirrel mandarin fish, steamed pork with rice noodles, 8 treasures chicken, roasted lamb chop, mushroom and pork, braised eggplant, mushroom with rapeseed, sweet and sour radishes, beef sauce, and fried salted peanut. The soup to end it all was duck soup. As for the carbs, Gu Wanning made scallion pancakes, meat pies, vegetable rolls, and pumpkin biscuits. However, because there weren't many guests and they had to be divided into 2 tables for men and women, the amount of food cooked wasn't too much. On the matchmaker's side, it was mainly Zhou, Mrs. Mother Chiu, and Haitang. As for the men's table, it was Gu Qingrui and Gu Qinglin who had rushed over. After the meal and sending off the satisfied King Rui and the rest, Zhou gave the list of betrothal gifts to Gu Wanning and said, "You and Qinglin discuss how you'll arrange these betrothal gifts. The 2 of us won't interfere." Chapter 592 Additional Dowry. Gu Wanning shook her head. "Since we've moved in, we've always treated you as family. You can make the arrangements. We have no objections." Yes, you guys can make the arrangements," Gu Qinglin echoed. The destruction of the Yang residence made him clearly realize the importance of Gu Qingrui and his wife to them. If they hadn't been helping them all along, even if they had broken off their ties with the Yang family, their fate wouldn't have been any better than Yang Chengsen's. At the very least, Yang Qinglin would be implicated and never be able to participate in the imperial examination again. Gu Qingrui smiled and handed the list to Yang Qinglin. "Pick 3 things you like and leave them as a memento." Yang Qinglin was surprised by that offer. He glanced at the list and picked out a jade pendant, an inkstone, and a painting. Gu Qingrui nodded. After picking out a wooden eagle ornament, he returned it to Zhou. "All right, I've gathered all 66 sets of dowry for Wanning. The rest would be left for Qinglin when he marries. If there's any extra, it's fine too." "All right." Zhou took it and looked at Mrs. Sunday. "Mrs. Sun, please help me out here. This is my first time preparing a dowry, so I'm afraid it'll make a mistake." "Yes, madam." Mrs. Sun immediately nodded. At the same time, she was very impressed with the couple. They returned a huge amount of betrothal gifts without blinking. It was rare to meet such selfless people. In the afternoon, before the betrothal gifts were stored in the warehouse, Zhou and Mrs. Sun brought some people and changed the 30 boxes of betrothal gifts into 25 sets of dowry, excluding the food and the ones picked out. In addition to the 40 boxes of dowry they had prepared previously, they sealed the 66 boxes and got them ready for transportation. In the evening, Zhou and Gu Qingrui discussed for a while and decided to personally gift 6 sets of dowry to Gu Wanning. 2 pounds of bird's nest, 100-year-old ginseng, some cloth, a tea set, a box of pearls, and a full set of soap and rouge powder that Gu Qingrui had personally made. Although they did not spend a tael of silver, these items cost at least 10,000 taels of silver. They did not expect that on the morning before the wedding, the Lu and Yao families, who had not shown their faces all this time, would come and send 2 sets of dowry each. When Zhou Ying found out they were Mrs. Yao's and Mrs. Liu's sisters-in-law, she immediately invited them in and said, "Aunties, please take a seat. What tea do you like? Anything is fine. We're not picky." Aunt Yao replied. Zhou Ying sized up the 2 of them. Seeing that they looked pale and thin, she knew their lives were not good. Chapter 593 Chicken Soup for the Soul. The Lu family was a merchant family, so their relationship with the Gu family was close. Therefore, they were scrutinized even more severely and only had 10% of the family property left compared to their peak. However, their house, 2 manors, and a shop still existed. It was not a problem to maintain the family's livelihood. After chatting for a while, Aunt Lu said hesitantly, "I heard that Lord Gu is promoting greenhouse vegetables now. I wonder if we ordinary merchants can grow them." "Of course. If you want to plant some, send a child who can endure hardship and let him help and learn in our manor. He can also explore and learn while helping out. Otherwise, you might not be able to grow these vegetables just by hearing instructions." "That's great. May I know where the manor is?" "Get someone to come over early in the morning the day after tomorrow, and Qingrui will bring him over." "All right, sorry for troubling you. Well, take our leave now. If you're free, drop by any time." After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she sent them out. At the same time, she gave them a piece of pork and a piece of beef. After they left, Zhou Ying took a look at the things they had prepared. The Yao family gave a set of gold jewelry and 2 batches of good fabric. The Lu family gave a pair of jade pendants, 1 purple and 1 blue, and 2 sets of bedding with good embroidery. Gu Wanning walked over and looked at the things on the ground. "Cousin-in-law, didn't you say that Mrs. Yao and Mrs. Lu didn't treat you well before? Why did you accept their family's gifts?" In this world, there are only 2 kinds of relationships between people. One is a blood-related relationship, and the other is a relationship of mutual benefit. However, your blood-related relationship is shallow, so you don't have many relatives that you can use. Therefore, you have to rely on benefits to make some connections. You have to remember that no matter what kind of relationship it is, it has to be respectful and mutually beneficial. Don't blindly take, and don't blindly give. Otherwise, the relationship won't last long. Now that the 2 families have extended an olive branch, well, accept it. As for whether we can continue to get along in the future, it depends on our cooperation. Just remember to keep some things to yourself and not tell others everything." Gu Wanning nodded thoughtfully and asked, "What is the relationship between husband and wife?" "Husband and wife. A couple's relationship is the most complicated of all relationships. When you can trust each other, respect each other, understand each other, and like each other, then you will be closest to each other. But if you don't even have the basic trust between the 2 of you, your husband is actually the furthest and most dangerous person to you. To put it bluntly, the relationship between your parents is actually more or less the latter. Yang Shiqing knows your mother quite well but doesn't love her. This is also the reason why your mother was killed. Trust, respect, understand, and love. It's easier said than done. But it's not difficult. As long as you 2 have no distracting thoughts, work hard together, and use your strength together, it's still possible. The only thing you must be afraid of is being hot-headed. Therefore, women would rather marry someone who's not rich but loves and treasures them for the rest of their lives. It's way better than wanting to marry someone wealthy but ending up as withered grass after giving up everything. Of course, that's excluding those who love each other truly. Yang Wanning looked at her in astonishment and said, although these words are somewhat rebellious, they make sense. So remember them clearly. Don't let yourself get hurt. Can you tell if King Rui likes me? I can only remind you that whoever gets serious first will lose, Zhou said after seeing her nervousness. In other words, whoever falls in love with the other first will lose. Chapter 594 Marriage. Yang Wanning immediately recalled Mrs. Cui. Although she couldn't say Mrs. Cui loved Yang Shiqing, it was true that she had done too much for him. In the end, she lost her reputation and her life. Zhou saw that Yang Wanning had taken her words in and continued, King Rui is a good person. He won't make things difficult for you as long as you don't make a big mistake. Of course, I must remind you that you are a secondary consort. You have to handle your relationship with her well, or else the two of you, especially you, will not have a good time. How should I handle this? Respect. I don't need to say much, and you should understand. Your duty is to serve His Highness, and you should focus all your attention on him. Try your best to make him like you and adapt to your presence. To put it bluntly, whether your position is stable or not depends on His Highness, not any other woman. Just be extra careful to prevent yourself from being schemed against. The last thing is not to go overboard, not to interfere in things that should not be your business, and not to fight for things that never belong to you. As long as you do these three things, even if the primary consort comes looking for trouble with you, His Highness will still stand by your side. As Zhou said this, she suddenly remembered the fourth prince and his scheme. It seemed that she had to keep an eye on King Rui's residence. After chatting for a while longer, Yang Wanning returned to her courtyard with a heavy heart. Soon, it was Gu Wanning's wedding day. Early in the morning, Zhou got up and got busy. First, the Ministry of Rights people came over to bathe Gu Wanning and dress her up. She didn't expect that the person who would be blessing her was Madame Consortin. After dressing her up, she even gave Gu Wanning 1,000 taels of silver as her stash of money. After they were done with their work, it was time for others to gift additional dowries. To be honest, there weren't many others here. Other than some normal gifts, only Mingyu was wholeheartedly prepared for this. Mingyu alone added another 10 sets of dowries, which was quite a hefty sum. When it was almost time, King Rui also arrived. Since Gu Wanning did not have parents, only Qinglin was out to greet the groom and ask for a red packet. Gu Qingrui carried Gu Wanning in her carriage and sent her to King Rui's residence with her dowry and Gu Qinglin. After the bridal carriage had left, Zhou poured a basin of water outside, and it was over. After returning, she entertained everyone and chatted for a while. Next, it was time to start the banquet and entertain the people who came to gift additional dowries. After a meal, when most people had left, Madame Consortin found her and asked, "Ing, do you still have some cucumbers?" "I do, but not much." "Why don't I send it to you tomorrow?" Madame Consortin shook her head and whispered, "Just give me as much as you have. My stomach hasn't been good recently, so I just want to eat something fresh to reduce the heat." Zhou was stunned when she heard that. Wasn't this constipation? She quickly asked, "Have you eaten any medicine? You shouldn't delay this for too long." Madame Consortin shook her head and grimaced. "I don't like to drink that medicine. It's too bitter." "All right then, please wait a moment, I'll get them for you." Zhou turned around and went to the kitchen. However, there were only 2 cucumbers left in the kitchen. Fortunately, the servants had gone for lunch, so Zhou could take out 5 more cucumbers from her inner space and hand them to Madame Consort An's nanny. After sending Madame Consortin off, Zhou returned to her room and laid down. She did not sleep. Instead, she spread out her divine senses toward King Rui's residence. At this time, the wedding banquet was almost over, so Zhou went to the bride and groom's chamber. Chapter 595 Discovery. Mingyu was having her meal with Gu Wanning. The two of them were talking and laughing, and it was a harmonious scene. Zhou took a bird's-eye view of the entire residence. Finally, her gaze landed on Qiao Lanlan, who was busy making soup in the kitchen. She thought Qiao Lanlan looked familiar, but she couldn't recognize her because she was obviously fatter than before. Just as she was about to look away, she suddenly saw Qiao Lanlan sneakily take out a packet of powder from her waist and pour it into the soup. After mixing it well, she ladled the soup into a bowl and turned around to shout, "Sister Qingtao, the sea cucumber and chicken soup is ready." Qingtao immediately walked in and picked up the bowl. "Thank you, Sister Lan." She turned around and rushed forward with the food tray. Just as Zhou was about to follow up, she suddenly saw Qiao Lanlan's sinister smile. However, it quickly disappeared, and Qiao Lanlan got busy again. Could she be the spy King Kong buried in King Rui's residence? Zhou muttered. After memorizing her appearance, she chased after Qingtao. She happened to see her walking into the main courtyard. In the main courtyard, besides Sun Miaoke, there were also the Empress Dowager, Consort Xian, and a few elders from the royal family. Who is she trying to harm? Zhou couldn't understand her target, and she couldn't be bothered to. Just as Qingtao entered the room, Zhou deliberately poked her leg with her divine sense. Qingtao tripped on the door sill and dropped the food tray in her hand to the ground, spilling the chicken and sea cucumber soup on the ground. Qingtao was so frightened that her face immediately turned pale. She immediately knelt and said, "Mistress, please punish me." Sun Miaoke was about to speak when the Empress Dowager near the entrance stopped her and said, "All right, hurry up and clean it up." The Empress Dowager saw clearly that Qingtao tripped because she couldn't raise her leg over the door sill. Therefore, the Empress Dowager assumed Qingtao was too tired and chose not to make a scene on this auspicious day. After Qingtao finished cleaning up and threw the broken bowl into the trash, Zhou took some soup into her interspace. She stared at them for a while more. After making sure that Qiao Lanlan did not strike again, she retreated. After entering her interspace at night, Zhou briefly explained what happened and handed the samples to Gu Qingrui. "Rui, do a test and see what that powder was." "All right, leave it to me. However, you have to feed those livestock on the grasslands." "No problem." Zhou agreed and turned around, heading to the grassland to get busy. After she was done, she picked out the ones ready for slaughter and rushed to the foot of the mountain. She butchered them and stored the meat in her warehouse. She left a fat goose behind and brought it into the villa to make a stew. As soon as the stew was ready, Gu Qingrui walked down with a tired expression and asked, "It smells so good. What delicious food did you make this time?" "I made a goose stew. Let's eat a bowl before sleeping." Zhou looked at the list in his hand and asked curiously, "Did you find anything?" "Yeah. It's just contraceptive medicine, but in powder form." "Just contraceptive medicine?" "Yes, I suspect that Sun Miaoke has been drinking this all this time. Otherwise, why hasn't there been news of pregnancy since the two of them are healthy?" "Really?" "Yes, having children is also a very important thing in the competition for the throne." "That's true. It seems like King Kong is trying to cut King Rui's line to the throne." "Yeah. Now that Wanning has entered his residence, I'm afraid there will be big movements soon. How should we remind King Rui?" "Don't you know that scares me?" "I'm sorry. I was too excited." Gu Qingrui grabbed her cute fist and patted her back. "Fine, what were you talking about?" "I remember the person who drugged the soup." "Who is she?" "Do you still remember Qiao Lanlan?" Chow Lon Lon. Zhou paused for a moment before she teased, "It's that rotten peach blossom of yours, right?" "Yes, but she's put on a lot of weight. In addition, I hadn't seen her for a few years, and that's why I couldn't recognize her. But she's still the same person if you look closely." After Zhou heard this, she suddenly remembered that 7th Su had promised to save Chow Lon Lon back then. She lamented, "Ugh, power and connections are annoying. Back then, when Chow Lon Lon was banished, I guess King Kong was able to save her. As expected in a backwater era. As long as you bribe someone to report her death, it'll be easy to fish her out of her exile. It looks like we have to remind King Rui. Otherwise, something bad might happen." Chapter 597 Informing them. You'd better think of a method to inform him then. "Don't worry, I will say that I met her yesterday when I went to the toilet and recognized her as Chow Lon Lon. As for the rest, I don't think I need to say anything more. Once he has eyes on Chow Lon Lon, she could forget about doing anything bad. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. Oh right, remember to come back for lunch after morning court. Don't forget that the Liu family will be sending someone over." All right. Oh right, take some time to sort out the greenhouse and potato planting instructions. I'll summarize them and print them out as soon as possible. Okay, leave that to me. It's still early. You should sleep a little longer." Gu Qingrui got up and started to put on his clothes. After he left, Zhou thought she couldn't fall asleep, but drowsiness soon washed over her. By the time she woke up, it was already late in the morning. After breakfast, she went to the study room and took out the books she had collected in her previous life. She began to summarize them seriously. On the other end, after Gu Qingrui left the morning court, he remembered that King Rui wasn't attending because of his marriage. After lunch, he rushed to the manor and found Heartwarming. He told him about Chow Lon Lon and said, "We have to let His Highness investigate her as soon as possible. If she's really Chow Lon Lon, then his residence might be in danger." Heartwarming quickly remembered who Chow Lon Lon was. He was the one who oversaw the Chow family's case back then. Most importantly, the Chow family almost took his life, so it was difficult for him to forget even if he wanted to. He never expected someone to have escaped their exile. He knew he had to investigate this properly. He quickly nodded and replied, "I'll remember this. I'll personally inform His Highness." "All right, I'll leave this to you. I have to go to my manor soon," Gu Qingrui said as he went straight home. After Heartwarming left, he went straight to King Rui's residence. He was also hoping there would be some good food waiting for him. As expected, King Rui was eating a bowl of sea cucumber and millet porridge when he arrived. On the side were braised beef, eggs, vegetables, and a plate of rolls. Seeing him enter, King Rui raised his head and asked in surprise, "Why are you here so early in the morning?" Heartwarming sat opposite him and smiled. "I knew you'd definitely have a good meal today, so I specially came over to get a free meal." King Rui glanced at him indifferently and asked the servants to serve him a bowl, too. It was not until they were done eating and the servants had left that he asked, "Tell me, what's the matter? What's so urgent?" "No, I'm just uneasy." Chapter 598 Keeping tabs. Butler Feng didn't speak directly. Instead, he looked at Mrs. Sun and the others. Seeing this, Gu Wanning waved them out. Butler Feng didn't hide anything after that. He explained the matter and said, "I don't know what was added to this chicken soup, but it can't be drunk. Please think of a way to dispose of it and try to avoid making a fuss. Well, deal with her as soon as possible." Gu Wanning panicked momentarily, but she immediately calmed down and asked, "What about the other dishes?" Butler Feng noticed her steadiness and nodded with satisfaction. The rest are fine. Only the chicken soup was spiked. Remember not to make a sound. Although the secondary consort was not the main wife, she still played a leading role. If something happened to the princess consort, she would have to take over, so having a steady personality was important. So far, Uncle Feng was quite satisfied with her attitude. All right, I'll remember it. Please enjoy the rest of your meal. Uncle Feng responded, turned around, and walked out in a hurry. After he left, Gu Wanning looked at the chicken soup on the table with a regretful expression, but she did not continue to drink it. She pulled 2 strands of hair out and threw them into the chicken soup. Once Mrs. Sun returned, Gu Wanning refused to drink the chicken soup because she had found her hair and asked her to deal with it. When Mother Sun saw this, she said, "All right, leave it to me. I will drink it later." Don't. There's hair in the soup, so who knows if there's anything else. It's better to be careful. Could it be that the princess consort deliberately arranged this? No. That would be too impatient of her. There's the risk of His Highness investigating. But what if? I don't think so. At most, this will just disgust me and won't have any effect. It will also just put me on alert. Just in case, I will prepare a silver needle later. After speaking, Mrs. Sun took the chicken soup away and disposed of it. Over the following half a month, Uncle Feng discovered that Xiao Lanlan would tamper with the soup of whoever His Highness had rested with the night before. Uncle Feng got someone to steal some medicine and planned to find someone to identify it. He ended up going to Gu Qingrui through Zhou Weiming's recommendation. Gu Qingrui did not reject the request. After testing it and confirming it was the same contraceptive medicine, he replied to Uncle Feng. After Uncle Feng received the news, he was extremely furious. This was related to King Rui's descendant, so he quickly informed him about it. When King Rui found out, his face was full of surprise. He could not figure out the other party's true intentions after that. So, he asked Uncle Feng to continue his surveillance. On the day Xiao Lanlan's medicine was finished, Xiao Lanlan found the servant she reported to and asked, "The medicine is used up again. What's the meaning of this? It's been so long, but the higher-ups still have yet to make a final decision. Am I going to continue like this? I'll definitely be exposed if this drags on. I'll report this matter to the higher-ups as soon as possible. You head back for now." The servant turned around and left quickly. Xiao Lanlan had no choice but to leave empty-handed. They both didn't notice a figure quietly following the servant until he returned to the dormitory to sleep. Soon, Uncle Feng received the news and immediately blamed himself. He did not expect that there would be more than one spy in the residence he was managing. How could he endure this? He said to the person, "Continue to monitor them. You 2 brothers, keep an eye on that servant and see who he contacts tomorrow. Remember, you are not allowed to alert them." "I understand." The person replied and turned to leave. Chapter 599. Make a move. The next day, in the afternoon, someone returned with a confirmation. After listening to it, Uncle Feng asked gravely, "Are you sure you didn't see it wrongly?" "I'm sure, but I didn't approach them as I feared being discovered. I didn't hear what they were saying." "All right, continue watching them," Uncle Feng said solemnly. At the same time, he knew it was within expectations. After all, a prince could not avoid these schemes. When King Rui returned that evening, Uncle Feng told him about this. "Your Highness, we found another servant last night through that woman. Today, the servant boy went out to get more medicine. The person who met him was 7th young Master Su's personal attendant. It looks like Gu Qingrui didn't get it wrong. That woman is indeed Xiao Lanlan." King Rui muttered and then asked, they're still meeting after dinner tonight, right? Yes, he's handing over more medicine. When the time comes, let's go together and see what we can get out of them this time. Yes, I will arrange for it now. After Butler Fong finished speaking, he turned around and left. King Rui went silent before muttering, "It seems that none of you can wait any longer. Fine, I will play with you." Chow Lon Lon finished her meal at night and again looked for the servant. What did the higher-up say this time? It's time to take action. Remember, only use it on the princess consort. Afterwards, push the blame onto the secondary consort and let them fight each other. The servant instructed her as he gave her a bag of medicine. Chow Lon Lon reluctantly took it and asked, "What about me? Am I going to lose my life? Why don't you dare to act now that things have really come to this? Don't forget that your family died at the hands of King Rui. Aren't you indirectly avenging your family?" Chow Lon Lon gritted her teeth and silently agreed to this. She then said unwillingly, "I just can't accept it. You promised me to deal with Gu Qingrui and his wife. It's been so long, and there's still no result. I want to see their tragic ending. I already told you, this matter can't be rushed." Gu Qingrui now had the technology to build greenhouses and grow sweet potatoes. He's at the height of his power and is highly appreciated by the emperor. If we strike now, wouldn't we be causing trouble for our master? But soon, he's going to print his knowledge into a booklet. Once that's done, it would be the day they die. Fine, I'll wait a little longer. What are you waiting for? If I'm not mistaken, the princess consort will stay at His Highness' place tonight, while act tomorrow. Don't worry, Master will definitely make them die with you. Chow Lon Lon finally nodded and said, "All right, I hope you keep your word. Otherwise, I won't let you off even if I become a ghost. Remember to act tomorrow." The servant reminded her once again and turned to leave. However, he had only taken 2 steps when Guard Chu's sword stopped him. When the servant saw this, he knew that he had been exposed. He was shocked and quickly turned around to run into a tree. Chow Lon Lon panicked when she saw this. But a large sword was placed on her neck before she could run. The servant was also quickly pressed to the ground by Guard Chu. "Take him to the dungeon." After King Rui finished speaking, he turned around and stepped into the dungeon. When the servant saw King Rui, he knew he had no chance of survival. He opened his mouth and was about to bite his tongue to commit suicide. However, he was struck unconscious by Guard Chu's palm and dragged directly into the dungeon. After entering, he immediately gave the 2 of them a muscle relaxant and began interrogating them. Because King Rui knew who their master was, Chow Lon Lon quickly confessed that the medicine she had received this time was intended for sterilization. Chapter 600 Chow Lanlan's death. The servant shouted angrily, "Ungrateful bitch, you ingrate! Master saved you and gave you a chance to take revenge, yet this is how you repay him. You saved me. Don't forget, it was your master who used our Chow family first. Otherwise, I would still be the eldest daughter of the Chow family. Now, you're ordering me around and making me wait on people in the kitchen full of oil and smoke. Is this your definition of saving me?" Chow Lon Lon shouted angrily. "But Master did save your life. Aren't you trying to kill me now?" The servant didn't know how to respond to that statement. Seeing this, King Rui looked at Chow Lon Lon in surprise. He didn't expect her not to know that old Master Chow had sided with the first prince. However, this was fine. It would be better to focus their attention on the 4th prince. They would be able to spill more secrets this way. He looked at Chow Lon Lon and said, "If he doesn't want to tell me, why don't you tell me? Tell me everything you know. It'll give you a quick death and a grand burial." Chow Lon Lon looked at him in surprise and asked, "Are you lying to me?" Is there a need for me to lie to a dying person like you? Chow Lon Lon revealed everything when she heard that. However, Seventh Su no longer valued her after her elder brother died. Otherwise, he would not have let her be a maid at King Rui's residence. Therefore, she knew very little. She did, however, mention a piece of useful information. The famous brothel in the capital, Yixiang Courtyard, was the property of Seventh Su. The crime of running a brothel was no lighter than the crime of dabbling in the loan shark business. Moreover, this was the largest brothel in the capital. This was very advantageous leverage. Is there anything else? King Rui asked again. Chow Lon Lon shook her head. King Rui then looked at the servant. This is your last chance, or you'll kill your entire family. I heard that it's a pity that your twins would have to die at only 8 months old. Uncle Fong said as he took out a pair of small silver locks with bells. When the servant saw the thing in his hand, his face was filled with disbelief. He thought he had hidden his identity very well but did not expect, at the thought of this, he suddenly felt that the remaining strength in his body had been sucked away. He looked at King Rui and asked, "If I confess, can you spare my family? If you want them to live, you shouldn't be in a hurry to die. You should be thinking about how to cooperate with us and not let your master find out that something has happened to you. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to do anything, and your family would still die." The servant looked at him in shock and asked uncertainly, "You want me to help you spy on them?" King Rui nodded and ignored him after that. The servant hesitated for a long time before finally agreeing. "Very good. I hope you can keep your promise." King Rui turned around and left after that. When Uncle Fong saw this, he was not in a hurry to take Chow Lanlan's life. Instead, he locked her up in the dungeon. As for the servant boy, although he was released, he was secretly monitored. At the same time, his family was also under surveillance. On the afternoon of the second day, Chow Lanlan's evil deeds were announced, and a bowl of poison sentenced her to death. She was then buried on a mountain in a thin coffin. In the afternoon, Gu Wanning was practicing in the yard when Sun Miaoko walked in and asked in surprise, "I didn't expect Sister Gu to know martial arts." "Greetings, sister." Gu Wanning stopped and bowed. She stood up and replied, "It's not really martial arts, but when I was in the Yang residence, my cousin was worried about my safety, so he asked my cousin-in-law to teach me a few self-defense techniques. They could be used for self-defense during dangerous times, and secondly, it's great as a workout, so I kept practicing it." Su Qing turned around and walked toward the back door. The servant also stood up and walked out. After coming out, he looked around and returned to King Rui's residence openly. Su Qing waited for him to leave before returning. After he left, he circled the street a few times. After ensuring no one was following the servant boy, he turned around and left. After he left, a figure walked out from the opposite side and quickly returned to the imperial residence. Zhou Ying, who had been paying attention to their residence, finally heaved a sigh of relief. In the blink of an eye, it was time for a minor scholar exam, and Gu Qinglin was successfully admitted. In order to let him relax, Zhou Ying took him to the manor for 3 days and taught him some farming knowledge. At this time, Gu Qinglin finally realized that farming was not just about farming. A lot of knowledge was involved, making him pay attention to agriculture-related knowledge. At the end of the month, King Kong married his wife. The 7th prince married his wife at the end of March, following the spring planting, particularly the planting of sweet potatoes. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.